Hi everyone, I just thought I'd do a little video based on a lot of the questions we're seeing on Slack and some misunderstandings, so I thought I might help you out a little bit and make this little bonus video. So what we're going to look at here are code examples to help with methods returning values, because I know most people are comfortable using methods returning with void, but maybe you need a little bit of help with returning values. Also, arrays and method parameters, that seems to be causing some trouble. And then using objects and object arrays, and then passing those in to methods. So what we're going to do is have a look at building out a couple of examples to show you how to do that. So I've got some boiler code here for setup and draw, and we're now going to start filling this in. Okay, so I'm going to start off with our first example, which is just a method to return a value. Okay, and it's going to return a true or false. So I'm going to write the method, and I'm going to call this method even. So it's going to return a value, and the value that I'm going to decide on is it's going to be either true or false, which means it's going to be a boolean that's returned. So therefore we start with the return data type being boolean, and we want the method then to be even. So it's going to tell me whether this is even or not. So I'm going to have to pass in some number, so we have a parameter as well, and I'm going to take in the number, and it's just going to be an integer, which is a number. So I'm writing a method here that returns a value. So this method is called even, and it returns true if the number passed in is even, otherwise returns false. So even writing that comment makes it clear what this is going to do. So that helps us in actually figuring out what we need to write. You might have seen an error popping up there. The method must return a result of type boolean, and this was specifically one of the questions that came up on the forums this week. So if the method has to return a type of boolean, then you can fix that straight away by saying return, and then is it going to be true or false. So let's just have a default of return false. Okay, and now we need to worry about how do we figure out if the number is even. So we'll have an if statement and a condition, and this condition then is going to work out, is the number even. So one way of doing that is if you divide by 2 and look at the remainder, if the remainder is 0, then we know that the number is even. And there is an operator that does that, and that's the modulus operator, and I've mentioned this is your friend. Okay, so the number that we've taken in is called number, so I'll use that here. So I'll say if number mod 2, and we want to test is that does that return 0. So is that equal to 0? And I'm putting all of that in a condition. So if all of that works out to be the case, that means it is even, so we want to return true. And there we go. So we're now returning true. At that point, when we have a return statement and we return true, it means that when the code is executing and it hits a return statement, it literally will return true, exiting out of this method, going back to wherever you called it from. And we'll see that in a second. So I don't even need to put else return false. I can just put return false, because if this doesn't work out, then this is the line of code that's going to work, that's going to be run. Okay, so that is our actual method, and now I want to test it out. So in my setup, I'm going to just hard code in a call to this, and I'm going to declare a variable to use in order to store the return value. So let's declare a boolean variable. I'll make it a local variable. So it's local in setup, and there we go. We've got B number type, so that's telling me It's a B for Boolean, and then number type. What type of number is it? Is it an odd number or an even number? Okay, that's the idea of the variable name. So now that I have a Boolean variable name, I can use that. Double clicking is a handy way of selecting, and then you can control copy and paste. Or Command C, Command V if you're on the Mac. So I'm going to store in my Boolean number type a call to this method. So how do I call the method? Well, we look at the name. I often find this is a handy way of doing it quickly, so I can just copy that, bring it up here and paste, get rid of the data type, and then what number do I want to pass into it? So I'm just going to hard code in a number. I'm going to hard code in the number 5. So what my code is reading now is B number type is going to be true or false, and it's going to get that true or false value by calling the method even, passing in the number 5. And then I'm just going to print to the console. Let's do a print line, and I'm going to print out whether it's true or false. So again, I'm just copying this variable here, pasting it in, and that's it. So let's try that out. So when I run the code, you can see in the console here, it's outputting false. So is 5 even? No, it's not. So that returns false. And if I was to go in and change the number, hard code, we can run it again, and you can see that the number is returning true. So it's saying 6 is an even number, but 5 is false. It's not an even number. Okay, so that's how we can call a method that returns a value. Okay. So the next kind of step up from there would be to then, instead of hard coding our values, what we'll do is introduce a new variable. And my variable is going to be an integer, and I'm going to call it enum. We'll set that to be 34. So I'm giving it an initial value. I could just copy these 2 lines. What we're doing here is just exploring how to use different approaches. So instead of typing in the number in here, I'm going to use that variable that I just created. So this is again passing a variable into a method. It will evaluate that variable that you've passed in, and it will again return the answer. So I'll put that one back to 5 so we can see both of them working. So I'm now going to have 2 print line statements, and let's see how that runs. So it runs, and for the number 5 it's returning false, and for the number enum, which is 34, it returns true. So again, now we've seen how we can pass a variable in and return whether that value is true or false. There is an alternative approach, which is instead of storing the return value in the variable, we can just call the method. So let's take a look at that one next. So we'll go if, and then we'll call our method in the if statement. So if even enum. So if that evaluates to true, in other words, if we call this method and it returns a true, then the if statement will be true. And what do we want to do if it's true? Well, let's just print out a message on the screen. Okay, so we'll print line. This is an even number. And if it returns false, then we can use the else. Else. Again, we'll just copy that. Print line. This is an odd number. So let's try that out again. Oh yeah. Put the quote in the wrong place. Let's put it there and there. And let's run it again. So we can see that this is an even number, where number is 34. Let's change the value of that number to 34 so we can test the other branch. Run it again. And now we're saying that 35 is an odd number. Okay. And to make that even more clear, you could change your print message. You could say print, and then we'll say the value, the number, which is enum plus, and then we'll just modify the message like so. And we can run that again. So now it's telling me 35 is an odd number, and if I was to change that to 34, it says 34 is an even number. So it's working out very nicely. Okay. So that's all well and good. It's showing us how to use hard-coded numbers, how to use variables, how to pass those variables as parameters, how to store the return value, and then how you don't have to store the return value. You can just use the return value as a result of a condition. So let's move it on again. And this time we'll introduce an array of integers. So let's get that set up next. So we're going to want to declare an array of numbers. So let's do that. So I'm going to call my array, it's an integer array. I'm going to call it numbers. It's an array, so we're using square brackets. And it's going to be a new integer array. And I'm going to store 10 numbers in it. So we declare it like so. Okay, and now I can use that inside a for loop. So let's take a look at that. So I'll just put in a comment here, and we've got an array of integers. Okay, so when we're traversing an array, in other words visiting each element in the array, then we're going to want to use a loop, and I'm going to use a for loop here for int, assign the value 0, and it goes up to keep going while I is less than, and the name of our array is numbers, and we can find out how many positions or indexes are in that array by using numbers.length. Okay, you could have said in this case for I is assigned a value 0, I is less than 10, and that would work as well. But by using length, it means if you decide to change the size of the array at the top up here, it means that you don't have to worry about then updating your code. So this is a better way of writing your code. It's more generic. Okay, it's more flexible. Okay, so we're going to write a for loop, and inside the for loop, let's put in some values into our positions. So we'll say numbers I, and we'll just initialize this each element in the array to be 100 plus, and then whatever the value of the loop counter I is. Okay, like so. And then we want to print out what those numbers are. So if I was to print out the numbers, we'll be printing each element, each index of the array like so. Numbers, square brackets, and then the index. And if I run that, oh yeah, forgot to increment, so we'll put in I++. And what we'll see then at the end is it'll print out all the numbers in my array. So it's 100, 101, 102, and so on. So what might be useful now is to next to those numbers to actually indicate whether those numbers are even or not. So I'm going to say, let's call my method even, And what am I passing in? I have to pass in a number, and we know how to get a specific number. It's in this bit here. So I'm not passing in the whole array, I'm only passing in one index at a time into the method. So I'm passing in numbers I. So if for example I is 0, this will be the first element of the array, and I'm passing in the first element of the array into the method even. It's going to calculate whether that number is even or not, and then return whether that's true or false. So my first number is 100, so we know that's even. So what we should expect to see here is the first one is even, next one's odd, and so on. So let's give that a whirl and see. So here we go. We've got 100 is true, 101 even is false, 102 even is true. So it's working out very nicely for us. So this is how you would pass an element of an array, one specific index, into a method. Remember, our method is called even. It's expecting a number. And in the array numbers, each element of the array is an integer. Okay, so now we're able to use arrays with methods and know what to pass in. We don't pass in the whole array, we're just passing in a specific element. Okay, so that's nice. We've now got arrays working with our methods and returning values. The last thing then is we'll take a look at is objects. So how do they fit in to what we're at? Okay, so let's create some code for our objects. So most games, space games anyway, certainly have aliens in them. So I'm going to create an alien object to get us going. So I'll create a new tab. And I'm going to create a class called alien. So we have class alien, curly brackets. And then the properties of my alien are, it's going to have an X property. I might make that, usually when we're talking about positioning, we're usually using floats on screen. So let's use float X and float Y to get started. And we know that when we are creating a class, we have a default constructor method. So here's our constructor method. It has the same name of the class, and we create it like this. And what we're going to do is initialize the X to be, for example, 100, and we'll initialize the Y to be 100. So these are just default values. Okay. So now we have this alien and we want to create a variable. This is the blueprint. So we want to create object variables of type alien. Okay. So let's come back up here, up where we're declaring all our variables at the top here. And we'll declare a variable to be of type alien. And let's create, for example, a Martian. And we'll make that a new alien, just like we did when we were declaring our array. We'll say Martian is a new alien, and that will call the constructor method and initialize the X and Y to be both 100. Let's create another one. So I'll create a second alien, did exactly the same way. And we'll call this second alien maybe ET. Okay, for ET, phone home. Okay, so let's then see how we might use that. Okay, so we have our aliens created. They have default X and Y values, and we now have two aliens. So what we're going to do is check if they currently have the same position. So I'm going to say if And then inside I'm going to call some method which I haven't written yet, called if same position, and I want to pass in two aliens to it, and the first one is Martian and the second one is ET, and we're going to compare these two. And if they are in the same position, we can just report that to the console. So let's put both aliens are in the same location in the galaxy. Okay. So let's try that out. And of course we haven't written same position, so I'm going to have to write this. So what I'm going to do is take again my header for this method, and now I'm going to come down and write that method. So this method is called same position, and we're going to just fill this out like so. It takes in two aliens like so, and it checks to see if they are in the same position. Okay, so now I'm going to write that. I can take the header and fill it out. It's going to return a boolean again, and it takes in an alien which is like that, and I'm just going to get rid of Martian, and I'm just going to call this alien 1, and it's also going to take in a second alien object which I'm going to refer to as alien 2. So just writing a method, and it's a simple method, and we just have a comparison again. And what we'll do is we'll say if alien 1, which I can get by double clicking this and copying so that I spell it correctly. So if alien1.x is the same as alien2.x, and you'll notice in the pop-up it's telling me what parameters or what properties I can access and what methods I can access in the object that I'm using. So I'm saying if these are both the same, then we have the same x position, but we'd also want to compare the y position. So I could just copy all of that and change the x's to y's, for example. And now I'm comparing both, and I just need to put brackets around that big compound condition. And I'm saying if the x's are the same and the y's are the same, then they are in the same position. So I will return true. And if I'm not returning true, then I need to return false. Okay. So you could have put in else if you like there, else return false. Okay, and that's fine as well. Okay, so let's try run that again. And you can see down at the end here, both aliens are in the same location in the galaxy. So what we've done is we've created those two aliens with and initialized them with this line of code, these lines of code, Martian and ET. And then down at the end, I'm saying if same position for Martian and ET, so I'm passing in an object, two objects in fact, and then those two objects are picked up here as alien 1 and alien 2, and now I've got a local problem to solve, which irrespective of what aliens I pass in, the problem is always going to refer to alien 1 and alien 2. Okay, so we're just returning true or false. So now we're using objects, we're examining the properties of those objects and returning true or false. Okay, now strictly speaking, if we are using encapsulation rules properly, I'd have had getters and setters set up. So you'd be using if getX or if alien dot getX equals alien 2 getX. You could do it that way as well. I'm just trying to simplify it a little bit just to help you with the understanding. Okay, so now we have using objects passed into a method and returning a value. So we're going to take it one step further, and we're going to look at an example of objects, not just individual objects, but an array of objects. And we're going to see how we might handle an array of objects and do a little example. Actually, just before I do, I might just go back at this one just to show that it is working. And let's just change the Martian. If I was to change Martian.y and set that to some other value, like so, and then run it, it should fail this time. It should say that they're not in the same location. Actually, it should say nothing. Yeah, and it says nothing. So maybe it would be an idea to put an else on this one. So we'll say else, and then I'll just have a similar statement like so. And we'll put in a not in the same location. Let's see if that works. And it's returning that they're not in the same. And if I comment out that line and rerun it, it should say that they are in the same location. And there we go, they're in the same location. Okay, so one more step. Let's take a look at creating an array then of objects. Okay. Okay, just bear with me for 1 sec. And what did I call this? Yeah, let's just do it. So we're going to come up to the top, and yeah, we're going to call this the fleet. Okay. So I'm going to create an array of aliens. So we have alien is our type, our object type, and we want to create an array of those, square brackets. I'm going to call my array the Imperial Fleet, and it's going to be a new alien array of size 10. Okay, so this creates a variable called Imperial Fleet, which is going to point to an array. And now what we've got to do, that array is an array of objects, and the objects are aliens. So we're going to have to allocate the space for each one of those. Okay. So I'm going to create a loop to create this. It's jumping around a bit. Let me come back to here. Okay, so let's start with a loop, and we'll create our loop counter variable I again, local to the loop. This time I'm going to start it at 1, and I'm going to make it go until we have where are we? Imperial Fleet dot length, just as we did with the array previously. Our array of integers, we're using the .length method, and we're incrementing I every time around the loop. Now inside the loop then we want to do a few things. So the first thing I want to do is to use our old method same position. So I'm going to say if, I'm going to call the same position method that we had earlier up here. Okay, we can take it from there actually. So I need to pass in two elements. What I'm going to do here, you notice I started with 1 rather than 0. And the reason for that is just to make this code maybe a little bit easier to read. So I'm going to check the Imperial Fleet, which is the name of my array, which I can get from there. And the position that I want to check is I, which is 1, minus 1, which would be 0. So I'm checking the first element of the array, and I'm going to compare it with the second element of the array, which will be that. And instead of I minus 1, it's just I. So it's checking position 0 and position 1. We're comparing those two positions. Okay. And if they are, if that returns true, that means they have the same properties, they're in the same position, then we again can do this. We can print out that they are, both aliens are in the same location in the galaxy. Otherwise, they're not. So I'll just copy that down here. And don't forget our trick for auto formatting. That should tidy things up and ensures that you have the right logic. Okay. So let's run that. And I've got a null pointer exception. So what the null pointer exception means is we're looking at a null pointer. Okay, so it's giving us back the wrong value. So let's see why that is. Okay, let's have a look here. Come back up. Of course, yes, I haven't initialized each element in the array. So this is the comparison that I will be doing. But before I can do that, I have to actually create the alien in each element of the array. So that's the bit that's missing. So I need another loop. So let's copy that. And this time I'm going to initialize each one of them. So I'm going to start at the first element, go to the end of the array, and every time I go around the array, I'm just going to initialize and create each one of those aliens. So I need to say the Imperial Fleet, which will be this. So the first time we go around the loop, we're saying Imperial Fleet 0 is assigned a value, a new alien, and I'm going to make a little change here, and let's add another property here called ID, which we'll store as we go around the loop. And if we don't supply a value, we can give it an ID of 999, and we're going to override this constructor by allowing us to take in the ID. So I'm going to take in an integer, which is the ID, and I'll change this to initialize the ID to be whatever number I pass in. So back in our code, this is where we're going to initialize it. So I'm going to say visit each element of the array, and I'm going to create a new alien, but I'm going to pass in what I want the ID to be. I'm going to pass in the ID of I. So whatever I is, that's what the ID of that alien is going to be. So effectively you're putting a unique number on each alien. Okay. Okay. Now that will make it start at 0. So the first alien would be called 0. So I'm just going to modify it slightly. I'm going to call the first alien alien 1 rather than alien 0. Okay, remember your arrays are indexed at 0, but maybe you don't want to use 0 for the identifiers. So this will help us fix that. Okay. So let's try that out. See, does that fix it? Yep. Okay. So what we've done is we've gone through, created our aliens and an array of them, and then we're comparing each alien with its previous partner in the array. So index 1 is compared with index 0, index 2 with index 1, index 3 with index 2, and so on. And if they are the same, they have the same properties, we're reporting that they're the same. So now let's put a spanner in the works. So after we've initialized them and they all have the same values, let's change one of them. So I can access any particular element of the array. So I'm just going to hard code in a value here. So I'm going to say pick the 7th one. Okay, and I'm going to change its X property to be, for example, 200. Okay, so now we know that one of the aliens has a different value to its neighbors. So let's now see what happens when we do that. Okay, so first one, second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one, seventh one. Okay, they're all okay. And then we have a problem, the 8th one. Remember, the 8th one has an index of 7. So we're saying that anytime we're using index 7 in our comparison, it's saying that they're not the same. So when we compare index 7 with index 6, it says they're not the same. And when I compare index 8 with index 7, it also says they're not the same. Okay. And we could maybe just change this to make it a little bit more clear. Let's just change this text. And what we'll do is use I-1. So we're saying enemy I-1 is in the same position as the enemy I. Okay, and we'll do the same. Otherwise they're different. So let's take a look at that. So I'll just change the print statement here to do something similar. And let's close that off. And I think that's it. So we'll just auto format again there. And let's run that. So now it's actually giving me the index so I can see what I'm talking about. So enemy 6 is breaking formation. Enemy 7 is breaking formation. Okay, enemy 8 is the same position as enemy 9. So we can see that once we've changed, putting in this change here, so that not the same, that's returning it. Okay. Right, so what I've tried to do there is to show you how you would use arrays, objects, methods that return values, and then write those methods so that they accept parameters, and how you can get at specific elements within an array or specific elements within an array of objects so that the methods that you write are much simpler. Okay, hopefully this will help you with certainly with collision detection. So you can add your logic now to figure out whether you've got a collision or not. But what I've shown you will show you, is certainly the basis for collision detection, also for creating arrays of Space Invaders, for creating lots of fruit. And remember, random is also your friend, so you might want to use that with positioning. And hopefully that clears up any issues that you're having up to now.